we know in the aviation industry and spoke aviation. And after I gave that presentation at ground school with the B29, Angie came up and said, do you realize what you're really saying? And I said, I don't know what I'm saying. I have no idea. And Angie said, well, it went into detail about really how the brain works and some other things. So I thought, well, shoot, you need to teach this from a different perspective. And so I asked Angie to come up. So Angie, take it away, because I think y'all are going to enjoy this.
All right, let me see. Can you all hear me if I just use my voice? All y'all? Anybody can't hear me?
What?
Cool. Perfect. All right. So this is a lot easier without the microphone because I'm not reaching anything. So what I took David through the other day was what we call emotional intelligence. For those of you that are pilots, you probably go through it. You go through refreshers. For those of you that are firefighters, you've seen it, you've been around it. I'm going to take it into a layperson's terms so that I explain it in a way that really makes sense to all of us that are here in this room. Emotional intelligence is used for first responders so that they better understand how to manage the situation. In our scenario, we could turn into first responders. We could turn into emergency personnel, and better yet, we are customer service personnel. So not only does this get used for first responders, but this is the same training we've been doing at the Perot Museum, at the Bush Center. We've also been doing this for the city of Garland. We do this inside of police academies and fire academies. So I want to give you a little bit behind what this is all about. Emotional intelligence has really been brought into light by a guy named Daniel Goleman. So I'm going to take you through what he's figured out about the brain, and this will hopefully not only help you at the squadron, but help you at home with all your significant others. So, there's my keyboard. Does everyone have one of the little flyers that we handed out? It's got a front and a back page on it. If you need one, wave your hands and we'll get you one. Okay, so here is what Daniel Goleman discovered. He discovered that every single one of us, male, female, from birth to death, has two parts to our brain. And we're not talking right and left side of our brains. What we're actually talking about is a rational part of our brain and an emotional part of our brain. So I'm going to start out by talking about the emotional, the more primitive part of our brain. It is the larger part versus the little rational part. I know I'm starting to explain a lot of your lives right now, aren't I? This emotional, this primitive part of our brain, this piece, let's see, has two exits, okay? So it's got one exit that drops it. If you look at your little drawings, it drops it straight out the mouth. Big hole, okay? It's got another little tiny exit where information goes out, and it's a little teeny tiny pinprick of a hole. And that's what sends our data up into the rational part of our brain. Starts explaining a whole lot more, doesn't it? So what happens is all data, let me get up to it, enters the brain through the emotional part. Whether you are male or female, all data goes into the emotional part of your brain first. It then has the opportunity to do some spinning around. You'll see that little tornado on the picture there? That means data comes in and it spins around. Spins and spins. And the hotter the data, the more emotional the data, the faster it spins. So let me give you an example of what happens. In your washing machine, you have a washer tub, right? Put all your dirty clothes in there. When you put heavy denim in that washing machine, what happens to it? Throws it out of balance. What else happens to it? It clumps together. It gets really, really heavy. And what happens when you go to take it out of the washer? You're tugging and you're pulling. Okay. Hot data. Gentlemen, when you wash your ladies' lingerie, I'm not assuming you have it. I'm assuming you're washing your ladies' lingerie. What happens to lingerie when you wash it? It's light and fluffy, isn't it? It's easy to take out. You lean in, you just sort of pick it out of the washing machine. Non-emotional, not hot data. In an emergency situation, data is what? It's hot. It is heavy denim. It hits this emotional primitive part of your brain, and it starts whipping around in circles. Well, that emotional part of your brain is like a rubber balloon. So it stretches, and it changes shape. When it stretches, stretches and changes shape. This exit here gets bigger. That exit up there gets smaller. If you're not trained and you haven't reviewed and you haven't recounted, this is why pilots have to go through this training every year. This is why firefighters have to go through this training every year. It's why police officers go through this training every year. If you haven't trained, retrained, and reminded your brain of how to handle an emergency, it turns into heavy denim that starts spinning and spinning around, and it can't make its way into the emotional, into the rational part of your brain. So all of a sudden, you're sitting there going, where do I call for an emergency? 911 slips your brain. You forget to call on the microphone. Oh wait, what button do I push? How do I push to talk? What do I do? Do I tell the pilot there's a problem? Don't I tell the pilot there's a problem? Do I grab Jim and go, oh crap, Jim, there's oil, as I go, screaming down the wing of the plane. First flight on a B-29. Jim, is that supposed to be happening? You gotta know. You've got to remind yourself. You've got to keep looking at all of this stuff because you don't want this emotional primitive part of your brain to expand. So David and I were talking about that accident that happened in Asia where the plane flipped the bridge. One of the engines had gone out. It was one of the engines had gone out. So the pilot starts talking to the co-pilot, what's going on, what's going on? And the co-pilot told the pilot the wrong engine had gone out. So they go to restart the wrong engine, they shut the plane down. The plane fell out of the sky. All it takes is a split second of panic for the data to travel into the emotional part and out the mouth without hitting the rational part of your brain. Once it hits the rational part of your brain, then it knows what to do because it goes through all of your training. It goes through everything you know. So how do we force stuff up? What happens when it gets up there? Well, let's take a look at this. That part that transfers, that's your filter. So not only does it have a little pinprick of a hole that it moves from your emotional into your rational, but it goes through a filtering system. What do you think these filtering systems are made of? And if you can cheat and read, it's on your paper. It's your personal experiences. So now, not only is it your training, but it's all your personal experiences. So let me give you an example. If you have a personal experience with a person wearing a blue shirt, we'll use blue shirts as an example, okay? And you decide that person was a total jerk. Total jerk. What happens every time you see somebody wearing a blue shirt? They're a jerk, right? So now, people hear what they want to hear. Because it goes up, it hits the total jerk filter, it bounces back out into the emotional, and it never passes to the rational part of the brain. Because we don't give someone that chance. So now I'm going to shift it from emotional, from safety into tour. So John's talking about wearing uniforms and how important it is for us to wear our uniforms. I get out to the plane, I want to look around, I have a question. I need to find somebody in a blue shirt. Because what happens if I can't find somebody to ask a question? What filter may pop up? A filter that there's nobody to help me. John's filter that happened the other day. So now you have a bad experience. Now you have a bad experience because it hits your I don't know what I'm doing filter, therefore nobody else knows what they're doing filter. So John's experience with that B24, he comes back and shares that experience. Because here's what it all boils down to, okay? That emotional part of our brain is so big, it guides everything we do. Think about Adam Smith's presentation, John's presentation, Al's presentation. What words did they use to describe everything they do? Passion, emotional, storytelling. When they were talking about fundraising words were about that personal attachment, that piece to the airplane. That's because people live thinking in the emotional part of your brain. Let's roll it back to emergencies. When there's an emergency, what part of your brain do you want to be using? The rational part of your brain. This is why David has us in this ground school. This is why we do ground school every year. We want to make sure that when you're on that plane, you're around that plane, you're at an air show, you're anywhere near any of our equipment, you know how to process the data. You don't go into panic mode and become that heavy denim spinner. You become that nice lingerie. It is not emotional to you. It is a totally rational situation. This is the really quick version of what's normally an 8-hour class. So I want to take this to another piece, because we ask, the question then becomes, how do I help then move data from emotional to rational? What do I do? There you go. Have you done sit? There's a way to do this, and we call this through learning styles and input styles. People have four styles. We have three input mechanisms and 4 learning styles. I'm going to borrow your phone here real quick. I want to take it to a cell phone. When he bought this iPhone, it was pretty dumb, wasn't it? How did he smarten up his iPhone? How did he get data in here? He got apps, so he downloaded stuff in here. Took pictures, downloaded stuff, right? How else did he get data in here? Typed it in, so he used the keyboard. It's an iPhone. What's the third way he got data in here? He spoke it to Siri. So you had 3 mechanisms for getting information into that phone. What that phone does with it then is saves it in different file types. So you've got your JPEG files, your Word docs, your movie files, your MP3s. You've got all these different types of documents. Our brains, in that emotional bubble and in that rational bubble, are doing the exact same things. So we take data into our brains through our eyes, through our ears, and through our skin and our touch. That's input. How we learn the data takes on a whole new scenario. So when we learn it, those of us that use our eyes to learn it will either save it via written documents or Excel spreadsheets. We'll save it via photographs and movies. We may save it, if we're an audio learner, we'll save it using audio files, MP3s, cassettes. If we're a kinesthetic learner, the touchy-feely learner, we feel it by touch. So let's take a couple minutes and go through this. So our visual learner, our read about it learner, we're on the back side of your document now. If the other side was your front side, or it's the front side if the other side is your back side, right? Yeah, come on people. Can you believe that didn't get a laugh? Every time I do it gets a laugh. So our read about it learners, these guys up here, how do you recognize them? So you're on tour. How do you recognize your read about it learners? You know what? They're going to tell you in about 20 seconds. You're going to notice that they might be taking notes. They pull a little notepad out of their pocket and they start writing things down that you say. They might take pictures of that incredible banner that these guys, that Con and Al made up and the rest of their team made up, put on the side of the plane. They're taking pictures of the words. That seems strange to a lot of us, doesn't it? But it's so they can go back and review those words. They're going to say things like, do you have anything in writing that I can take home from this airplane? They might say, can you kind of take me through a step-by-step version of how this happens? Is there an order that you have to follow to get this plane off the ground? And they're looking for things to be specific. So when Jim's sitting at the bottom of the stairs and he's prepping the folks to get into the airplane, this particular read about it learner, the guy, the girl, that's saving information in a document file or in an Excel sheet format, they're listening for Jim to walk them through very specific things. They data. They want numbers. They want to know 18,000 planes were made. They want to know how many were made at Willow Run, and they want to know how many were made in San Diego. They're going to ask you, what number is this plane? Those are the only ones you want to give this information to. Because the rest of them don't care. And I'm going to explain that here in the next one. The see it done learner. Me. Fortunately. Not the see it done learner. Has to deal with me. The see it done learner. We say everything is a picture or a video. That means in order to get stuff into my particular brain, you have to do it in a way that I can create a photograph or a video of it. In fact, when we're training, and John and I have had this conversation 1,000 times, where's the video I can watch to learn how to do that? If you're going to show me, see there's my keyword, you're going to show me how to put the tow bar on, you need to show me, don't tell me. Don't give me a piece of paper with a written document on it. You actually have to physically show me how to put that tow bar on. Once you show me, I got it, don't repeat it. Because I will make a videotape of it. You recognize us because you'll see us taking notes, and they have lots of circles, lots of stars. In general, you'll see us carrying, if you've got a pocket full of pens, at least 2 or 3 colors. You'll notice our glasses are all different colors. You'll find that we bling things up. Keywords that we might use. What can I see? Can you show me something about the plane? I need to visualize what was happening. In fact, what you'll find is when you start telling a story about the plane, they're going to close their eyes. What are they doing when they close their eyes? They're visualizing the story. As a result, when a see it done learner, me, tells the story, I tell it really different from the way Jim tells it, the not see it done learner. I'll sit there, and when somebody walks into the catwalk of the plane, I'm like, and do you know that it was a guy's job to stand here, hold on, and kick the bombs out? I am demonstrating the video. And see, he laughed. Because you can picture it in your head. So can everybody else. So now, that video learner walks out of that airplane going, dang, that is the coolest airplane. And then they like me. It's all about that, right? Now you're so remember, their keywords are see, watch, visualize, look. You will hear those statements. This from a safety perspective, and let's roll it back around to that. If somebody is asking you questions, or they're saying, I see something, and you come back and say, describe it, and they describe it in very visual video terms, understand that the describer and the receiver may not be talking very well. Because if one guy needs order and one person's giving it in picture format, we got a problem. So this is telling us that I have to learn how you learn so that I can take the data that is here and stuff it into your brain. It doesn't matter how I learn. It matters how you learn. Because otherwise, I can't teach you anything, I can't make you safe, and I'm certainly not going to be able to tell the pilot what's going on in the back of the plane. Because that's my job. Third learning style. Our audio learners. These guys, they want to hear about it, they want to talk about it, and they want to ask about it. This is that million question asker person that stands in line and says, hey, how come? What about? What if? Did it ever? Are you sure that? I heard. Met those people on tour? They want to talk to you because they're making an audio recording in their head. They're making these cassette recorders. They've got an iPod in there. And that iPod is sucking that data down and it's holding on to it for life. You might find that they just stare. And they're staring because they're recording. Don't judge that book by its cover. Don't let that go into your emotional part of your brain. Let that go into the rational part of your brain. If they're staring, they're learning, they're absorbing, they're sucking it in, they're being the sponge. You also find that this is the same person, they're probably sitting next to you right now, that as they look through all this material, they're reading it out loud. When they signed the hold harmless, they read it out loud. Because this person doesn't input data through their eyeballs. They input data through their ears. So while they see it on a paper, in order for it to record, they have to hear it. If they don't hear it, it didn't happen. So let that person read out loud and let them take longer than it takes you to read it. Because they not only have to read it with their eyes, but they have to hear it with their ears and translate it into data in their head. So they've got these little ears and microphones inside their head that's doing all that for them. So give them a chance to read through that paperwork. Their key words. Hear. I need to listen to you. That sounds good. And they love the word boom around airplanes. They love to talk about crashes. And the funniest thing about an audio learner, and I love this one, you ask them why they were late to work, and they go, oh my God, it was awful. My dog threw up all over the floor. Or they tell you about their trip to Walmart, and they say, oh, it was so disgusting. That woman in front of me, she kept sneezing and putting her hand on the rail of the cart. They always had sound effects to their conversation. Dead giveaway. Dead giveaway. So let's talk about this last group. Oh, let me take you to this one. If the pilot says to you, what did it sound like? Dead giveaway. So David's up there and he's going, Angie, what did it sound like? What did it sound like? I can't use my video brain and say, I don't know, I just saw it leaked it. He's going to sit there and say to me, what did it sound like? I'm the holder of the data, right? I have to get my data into his brain, so I got to tell David it was. And if David's the audio learner, guess what he just got? The data. He tells pretty funny jokes. So I'm trying to figure out how to learn you are. Him? Probably. So our last group. Love these people at a squadron. These are our touch it, feel it, do it learners. I know, that's HR touchy, whatever. Touch it, feel it, do it. They process by touching. These are the folks that come up to Diamond Lou and they just do this. And they're getting their sexy on with that airplane. It's not their sexy on. They are transferring the data of that airplane into their brain by touching it. They're the ones that make us crazy when they get near the cockpit. Well, the ones that drive us nuts in the bomb bay. Because I gotta touch everything. We're like, really? Yeah. Because they actually don't see it, they don't learn it until they touch it. When you go shopping with these people, they're all, ooh, I really like this shirt. Ooh, I hate this one. They can't see it, but they can feel the fabric. They can tell designers by the fabric. They love to touch the tires, the propellers. This is the ones we're constantly chasing, going, don't touch it, it's hot, don't touch it, it's greasy. Somebody used the term, even if you're just polishing the plane. I'm going to tell you something. For our kinesthetic learners, the folks that polish this plane are the most important people on the planet. Because they are touching that plane, and every piece of history, every story they've ever been told is coming to life when they touch that airplane. But they have to touch the airplane in order for that story to come in. So now you understand these kind of little fun things that people do when they are on the plane. These touchy-feely learners, you'll notice that they tend to see the documents, and they're going to walk up, and it's wild to watch, and they touch the banner. It just seems bizarre. But what they do is they engage their kinesthetic by touching the banner. Once they've engaged that kinesthetic, they can kick in a secondary learning style. So they might, the entire time they're reading the banner, have their hands on it, like this, as they walk down the banner. Okay, That's great. That tells us they're walking away with the data. Now, David said something really interesting. I don't really know that, right? He does say interesting stuff. So here's what David said. He said, I'm a little bit of all of those. He better be a little bit of all of those. He's in charge of that airplane when I'm flying in the back of it. That means he's got to step up his game because he doesn't know who else is on the mic. And in an emergency situation, David can't be sitting there going, give it to me in pictures. He's got to be able to translate every one of those languages like that. That means that each of us in the back, when we're in the back of the plane, we've got to be translating everything in our brain into all those different languages. Whether we've got passengers in the back, whether we're outside at a tour stop, or we're in an emergency situation, we have to be able to take that data and move it to the person that needs the data immediately. The more you think about this, the more you learn it, the stronger you're going to be as a crew member. That means take what you learned today, go back, review it in your style, and then learn it in the other styles. Because you don't know who's on the other side of that microphone. And you've got to be able to share that data, because what we don't want to happen is for David to shut down the wrong engine. We don't want Al to shut down the wrong engine, because you went into the emotional spin and started spitting out your mouth instead of going up through the rational and letting it come out your mouth. Questions? Good? Did I hit all the learning styles?
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
In an emergency, which one of these is going to give the pilot the quickest response to react?
The one that you can best speak it in, and the one that they best understand it in. Get to know your crew
The
team.
plane's going down, it's not fast enough.
You got to know your team before you get on that plane.
So you got to coordinate them all?
You got to coordinate them, and you got to know your stuff. And that goes back to what these guys have been standing up here telling you all morning. The better you know your stuff, the faster your brain is going to process and push right up through that filter, and boom, it's done. If you don't know your stuff, you panic.
So that's why the people in the team on the plane survive better.
That's right, because they know their stuff. Know your role, know your team. That's what teamwork is.
And other people are working with you.
That's it. Other questions? Hey.
You know, one of the things as pilots, I think we often ask questions trying to get, facilitate a certain medium of communication, such as what does it look like, is it hot, you know, all those different questions. So a lot of times when we're asking questions, I think we try to pick the medium of communication, but yet in the ground school, that's maybe the emphasis item of, well, if you're dealing with this situation, this is probably how you're going to communicate.
That's it. And so what David's saying, for those of you that didn't hear, we're going to learn ways to share the information, because that's going to be the easiest way to share that information. That's the way the pilots need to hear it. Again, you're going to have to force yourself out of your style. If they don't have a picture to show you, then you better pick up a different style. Because if David asks you, was it hot? You can't sit there and go, I don't know, but there was smoke coming from it. That doesn't answer his question. So you've got to learn what they're telling you, take it, process it, put it into your data, but know how to share it back and to answer the question he's asking the way whomever is asking you the question needs it. Thank you.
Another thing I know you and I talked about was when information comes into that emotional part of our brain that goes around. Oftentimes it's hard because we talk about crew resource management, error management, and determining what are threats, or determining information that needs to go through our certain filters. So.
And now David's bringing up that point. So here's what's happening in your brain. Okay? So something's going on. I don't know. Do I say something? Do I not say something? I don't know. Should you err on the side of saying something Because what you want it to do is to go through your filters and go, you know what? I know what normal looks like. And it's got to hit that normal filter. And when it hits that normal filter, you got to know what normal looks like and what normal doesn't look like. If he says, don't worry about it, or Jim says, oops, they put too much oil in and it's just kind of extra coming out. Okay, Jim's the expert on that one. I'm okay with it. But if I tell him, and he says, you got to radio David, and David or Al or whomever's in the front of that plane says to you, Angie, and they start asking me questions, now I've got to be able to take that data, pull it out of the spin, shove it into the rational so that I'm on top of everything that David's asking me. So the more I know, the less the swirl. The less I know, the more the swirl. You get it?
No, just this, and it's so, and it shows now why experience is so important.
More hours, more minutes, more time. And this goes back to what they were saying earlier. Just because you do ground school does not mean you're qualified to get on that plane. It means you have started the learning process. You have started getting familiar with it. And let me tell you, I'm going to tell you from my personal experience. I was ready to go. I've done about, at least 10, 14 flights on this plane. Jim lets me go up there alone. First night, I get up there, I had a puker. What the heck do you do with a puker on the plane? Stuck his head out the window. That's what my dad did with me. Of course, didn't know where the bags were. So I didn't know what to do. I got on the phone. Where's Don Albrighter? You've never seen somebody run out of the cockpit so fast. The only guy on the plane that knew where the barf bags were. So we learned to incorporate barf bags in training. Know where your barf bags are and carry them in your pocket. Because it's nasty. See the nasty, that's the visual. That's me giving you the visual. So know where this stuff is. When you learn something that you didn't learn, get it back to the training team, get it to Al, because Al's going to add it to the manual. Al's going to add it some way so that we can take the barf bag scenario on to the next group of trainees. Any other questions, comments, throw-ups?